Hey guys, welcome back. I am beyond excited for today's video because this is actually the first time I've ever done something like this before. You guys, I have Rosenberg. So we're going to have a little chat with you guys about a ton of different topics. So Ross, thank you so much for doing this. It's actually an honor, and I'm glad you're my first person to kind of come on this channel and do a little Zoom chat with my viewers. So if you can just give everyone just like a brief, even though if anyone's watching me, they've 100% already watched you. So if you can just give them like a brief intro on who you are and what you do, that would be great.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for considering to have me to be your first person. I am honored and very, very pleased, and I look forward very much to our discussion. A little bit of an introduction is, well, I've been a psychotherapist for 32 years. I have a specialty in many areas, including trauma, narcissism, codependency, or what I call self-love deficit disorder, addictions, and a couple more things. I also own the company, Self-Love Recovery Institute. I wrote the book, The Human Magnet Syndrome.
Which we're all aware of that book. If you guys are watching and have dove into codependency, go ahead, Ross.
Well, thanks. It's funny because I just found out from my publisher that we've sold 120,000 copies and now are published in 9 languages. And all I wanted to do was, explain something to people to help them solve their problems. And who would have ever guessed? But yes, I wrote that book, and and I'm a bunch of other things that you can find out more, at my selfloverecovery.com website, and we'll talk more about that later. But thank you so much for having me. Is it your show, your podcast, your YouTube channel?
It's everything. It's everything. So when I started, I first started with YouTube, and then now we have the podcast, Heal, Survive, Thrive. So we talk about a ton of different topics. We talk about narcissism. We talk about codependency. I really wanted to have a chat with you about this self-love piece, and I wanted to get your take on it. What do you think is one thing that is missing from being a person that's whole and complete and healthy? What does that look like for you?
That's a great question. As a psychotherapist and who has spent, most of his career in the mental health field, I tend to see things expansively. I look at things that there are always more answers than people think. So the most important element of healthy mental health is you have to love yourself. You have to respect yourself, and you have to care for yourself. If you do not have self-love, then everything from that point on is impacted or tainted.
I remember when I started this channel and I started self-development, even just in my own personal life, and when I was learning about codependency, when I was learning about childhood, why am I this way? The narcissism stuff trickled in after I learned about the codependency, learning about programming, learning about, our subconscious mind, our conscious mind, childhood development, all of those things, which equaled, I guess I'm not a healthy adult, right? Because I didn't have the skills, the tools that I needed growing up to learn what that actually looked like. I mean, we don't really learn that so much growing up. Even if we had a great upbringing and lovely family and friends and parents, even if they gave us majority of what we needed, I always felt like there was a period in the development of a child going into that adult, teenage years, adult years, where you need to learn, how do I transfer what I received and then turn it into me doing it for myself? Because you can hear praise and you can get the validation from mom and dad all day long. And yes, to a certain extent, that will absolutely help you become a mentally and emotionally healthy adult. But there's an aspect of how do I turn that around and face it to me? And on this channel, we call it parenting ourselves. So what do you think in terms of, self-love and loving yourself and all of these aspects, the confidence, self-esteem, validating yourself, soothing yourself, that's so hard for people to learn how to do?
Well, self-love, or what I call self-love abundance, is not difficult if you were raised by loving parents who respected you unconditionally, who cared for you unconditionally. our childhood attachment phase in our life is crucially important in developing what will be our adult personality traits. And if we receive, unconditional love, respect, and caring from our parents at an early age, we come out of childhood with this belief that we're okay, we're good, independent of our mistakes. And that becomes what I call you become what I call a normal adult. That doesn't mean a perfect adult. That doesn't mean someone who doesn't make mistakes. So when you have the foundation for self-love, then learning, being healthier, growing, evolving becomes possible. When you were raised in families such as mine or many of my clients who identify with the term self-love deficient or codependent, they can't get to that point. They can't find what is good about them. They can't insist on people treating them with love and respect because they don't have the foundation, because down deep, their conception, their belief system about themselves is that they're fundamentally flawed. And if they don't somehow make another person feel better, then they can't justify their need for being healthy and happy. So to your point, as adults, we have to make a decision, and healthy adults and adults who are struggling with mental health, we have to make a decision on our mental health. But when we are self-love deficient or codependent, it is so difficult to overcome what I call the invisible forces that are tugging us down and tying us to our self-love deficit disorder.
I always found it intriguing how many layers to this there is. It's not black and white. Like you said, like there could be someone that got a lot of what they needed and still struggle. And then there are some that didn't get anything at all and of course have struggled, but were able to get to a place of, like you said, that decision, that taking responsibility, awakening, awareness, whatever it is that you want to call it, that allows them to just start the process of, not only backtracking and learning, okay, this is why I am the way I am. This is what happened growing up. Okay, all of this is starting to make sense. And now what do I do about it? But start to kind of heal, right? Like start to really learn this stuff. And I always tell my viewers and my clients that these are skills. This is something that you have to learn and practice every single day in these small moments, because it is the voice from how you were raised, programming, things that were repetitive time and time again, the invalidation, all of those things that of course equaled that codependency. And some people, it's the struggle of just, what do I think? How do I actually feel? And is that right? And is this not okay? And just honoring that. Again, it's layers. Some people really start there. Some people start with not even being aware that they are codependent or that they lack this ability to really take care of themselves on an emotional level, on a mental level. And then there are the people that get it, and it's just a matter of reiterating this skill over and over and just honing this practice.
It's interesting that you're talking about skills. And let me first reflect upon myself. As I talk about, even write about in my book, I've been married and divorced multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in therapy multiple times before and after, but yet afterwards, after a terrible marriage and then divorce with a narcissist, somehow I found myself back in the arms of another narcissist. And what I came to understand after creating my human magnet syndrome and codependency cure material is that skill development, typical psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral treatment techniques do not work when you have a trauma-based disorder, which the roots are unconscious or disassociated.
Right.
And I say that because most, and I would say around 95% of all the clients that I see now have been in therapy for great lengths, multiple times, and never had any of that therapy impacted their codependency or SLDD. And it's not that the therapists did not know what they were doing, is they didn't understand the problem of what I call self-love deficit disorder and its origins. Skill development is crucial in what I do also, But if you teach someone about self-esteem, you teach someone about boundaries, but the unconscious forces that pull them to narcissists and the fear and the loneliness and shame that binds them to these relationships that are often narcissistically abusive, the skill development does not stick. And if it does, it's never enough to offset their attraction and the magnetic pull to keep in these relationships. So yes, what you are doing is absolutely crucial, as what I am doing, because they're different and similar, but without the connection to what caused it and somehow the resolution of it, the skill development doesn't always stick and make that big of a difference that people really need, at least from my point of view.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree with that. I think the question that I'm always asking them is what really makes the difference between someone learning these things. I always try to break it down into the most simplest terms or simplest ways, because if you teach someone about confidence, boundaries, things like that, and they've never done it before, they don't even know what that really should look like, it's very overwhelming. It would be like me saying,
Yeah,
okay, you know nothing about how to put a car together, so here you go, like go put this car together, rather than learning just like one aspect of the car and how to do that really well, and then moving on to, okay, now I can change the oil, now I can change a tire, rather than saying, no, just put the whole car back together, I'm going to give you every single piece.
right.
So for me, it's so important to, with recovery and healing and getting better and mental health and learning how to be healthy, it's like these small little things that you just have to master one at a time. I think where people sometimes will get frustrated is because they do want an instant change, and you're dealing with a lifetime of trauma. I mean, you're dealing with a lifetime of stuff that is just with you, and you can't just let it go and, pack up a new suitcase of all new healthy stuff that you can now incorporate into your day-to-day life. It takes work for sure, and it's something that people just have to be aware of. But I always tell people it's easy work. I think it's easy work because it's little things,
Right.
and when you can master one little thing, you feel a sense of accomplishment, to feel good. It doesn't mean you're gonna be able to stand up to your narcissistic mother tomorrow,
Right.
and just heal from codependency in 6 months. It could take years. But I do think the more you do these little steps, it adds up to real significant change.
I don't think there's a coincidence that we found each other and we decided to do this talk, because despite our differences, we have a lot of similarities. And when you talk about these steps, these stages, it's very similar to my whole self-love recovery treatment program, is that every step in itself is not as difficult as the stages within a step. And if people can just focus on accomplishing one new skill, one new insight, one new change of habits, neutralizing a bad habit, it excites them, it empowers them, and enables them to see themselves as, a person who can be what they wanted to be or what they should have been. And but that said, I have to also explain why it doesn't work if there's something in the background that is going to offset it. So I want to use a simple analogy of alcoholism. Many people who are addicted to a drug such as alcohol, they find this drug to self-medicate to solve an underlying emotional problem. And it could be sadness, grief, low self-esteem. And that medication helps them to feel better in a world in which they don't feel like they fit, or they don't feel good enough. It numbs the pain. So if you go into a treatment facility and they say, okay, we're going to show you step by step how to solve your alcoholism. And let's say that analogously, you and I are treatment providers for alcoholism, and we do a fantastic job, but we don't get to the underlying roots to why that person started to drink. What will happen is we will have made profound impact in that person's life, and they will get out of the treatment, go home and feel fantastic. But those same problems that led them to wanting something to make them feel better, to detach, to numb out, are going to come back up. And there's going to be this internal struggle between what you've learned and mastered and why you needed to use the drug ahead of time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the skill development that we both teach our clients has to be countered with some type of mediation, some type of therapeutic coaching interventions that gets to why we needed to use these bad habits, what purpose were these bad habits serving, and dig deeper, and then work on that also. And together, we have what I call the codependency cure, or the solution. But what do you think of what I'm saying?
Funny that you say that, because I remember going to therapy for the first time and sitting and learning and going back. And I always say, I always needed to know the why. I couldn't fix something without knowing the why. I had to answer that question. You know, why is it that I behave in this way? Why is it that I attract this type of a person? Why is it that I have anxiety? You know, why is it that I'm always overthinking? Why is it that I'm obsessed with making everything okay with everyone? OCD, control, you know, all of those types of things. So when I went into therapy, I remember doing it and also doing self-development at the same time. And I didn't realize what I was doing. And it's funny that you gave this example, or you just said what you said, because now looking back for myself, I think a big part of why I feel like it worked was because I was doing both at the same time. I wasn't overwhelmed, you know, like I wasn't going to therapy and doing coaching and buying a program and do it, you know, I know that I've had plenty of those clients where they're doing too much. And I'm like, one thing at a time, you know, or maybe two things, but don't overwhelm yourself. But I was doing both. And I think if you have to know the whys, and you have to go back, because that really is significantly healing towards being able to go forward and learn these skills. Because you're right, these are skills that you're going to learn, but if the trauma is still there and that stuff is still sitting with you, then you're right, it's never going to work. It'll work for a short time, you'll learn a couple things, but you'll always resort back to what you've always known and what you've been addicted to, for sure.
Can I say something?
Yes.
So now I want to complicate things further. Reflecting back on my experience as a psychotherapist, I get a lot of clients who tell me about their psychotherapy. And I would say maybe a third to a half of them have had therapy with, or coach or work with coaches who help them figure out the whys. And that's extraordinary work. But what about if the why, which is responsible for self-love deficit disorder or codependency, is unconscious? It was disassociated from our memory because of its trauma. SLDD, codependency, is caused by attachment trauma. Now, I'm not going to explain this here, but I have this information on my on my YouTube channel and other sources. But you know, I have this pyramid model that explains that SLDD, or codependency, is a symptom, and a lot of people go to therapists and coaches who help them with the symptoms. The very bottom, the very foundation of the disorder is attachment trauma that has been disassociated, like much other trauma or PTSD is. So if the cause of SLDD, self-love deficit disorder, is unconscious, disassociated, repressed, and a therapist doesn't know how to get to that, then you cannot move a person forward past the disorder. There's a stark difference between getting someone to explain what happened and then working out the whys. But if you can't get to the trauma, then my clients stay stuck. So what I do in my psychotherapy is I have created a technique, a strategy, a treatment program that does many things, including getting to the unconscious element of the whys, bring that forward and integrate it. So then when you and I then work our magic, it integrates, it settles in, and it becomes permanent.
Now, the unconscious stuff, can you just explain a little bit of that to my viewers? Because I
Oh,
think
sure.
that that will be really important for them to understand, because they could possibly be and not even, obviously, and not even be aware of it. So how does someone experience something and that trauma becomes something that's unconscious?
I should say that I have a 6-hour educational video on this topic, and I will
Mm.
give you like a minute worth of an explanation.
The
Um,
recap, the gist.
Not even a recap, a minute's worth. But trauma, when trauma is beyond a person's capacity to process it, deal with it, work through it, the brain behaves mechanically. It decides it's too much for it, and it puts it into another part of the brain called the
Mhm.
amygdala or the limbic system, where the person doesn't remember it. So when we think of PTSD, most people who have PTSD cannot remember or do not want to remember what happened to them because it's just too painful. So that trauma is disassociated from one's memory. It's still in the brain. You can't remember it. It still impacts a person's mental health, their emotions. So when trauma is disassociated, in the olden days, Freud called it repressed,
Mm.
unconscious. It means that the brain just, our mental health at the time was not strong enough to deal with it, so it puts it offline. So when I talk about the trauma that creates SLDD or codependency, it's the trauma that was endured during a person's formative years, from birth to age 7 or 8. And if you are born into a family with a narcissistic parent and a codependent parent, that trauma that SLDs have is tremendously painful, that is so hard to get to, you put it away. And if a therapist doesn't understand it, doesn't know where it is, doesn't know how to get to it, and doesn't know how to bring it forward and integrate it, the skills and the services that we provide, it doesn't stick.
Right, right.
And that's what I'm trying to teach the world, is not only how to understand self-love deficit disorder or codependency, its origins, but to also teach them the skills, the techniques, and how to solve something that you might not even recognize or see.
You know what I love about that is because, I mean, I talk a lot about childhood development, and I talk a lot about those, um, blank slate years in development, 0 to 8, like you were saying, where we're completely susceptible to everything. We're sponges. I mean, we all know this. Most people know this in terms of
Right.
child development. But I think it's important to understand is what you were saying is the trauma, because, and I think people don't often realize how much you as a child were not able to even deal with half of the things that you heard and saw and felt, because you didn't have the skills. You didn't know. Um, but what I love about what you just said is that now as an adult, because let's be frank, we're still going through trauma. 9/11
Exactly.
trauma. That was a trauma for all of us. So some people don't go on a plane now because of that. So even learning these skills as an adult to help you with future trauma is really essential. I got mugged in this alley, I got into a car accident, all of those things. Do you think as an adult that, and I know we're kind of going a little all over the place, but I just want to hone this because I think it's a great thing, because as people are learning and going back and learning these skills, you're still going to go through the rest of your life of experiencing things, and how these aspects that you and I teach really help your future life, not
Yeah.
just going back and healing
Oh,
that unconscious stuff.
absolutely. In fact, the second version of the human magnet syndrome, I started the book with a chapter that basically says, stop passing the baton forward. The idea is that if we don't solve our codependency or our self-love deficit disorder, it's going to be passed on forward to generation. And to figure that out, we have to take responsibility for the problem.
Mhm.
And you can't solve a problem if you blame someone for something that you are involved in. And that's why I created this whole metaphor of the dance that, the codependent and the narcissist are partners in a dance. They both come to the dance. They both enjoy the dance. They both choose the partners. One leads and takes control and one follows, and both feel good in their roles. But I also wanted to say that, and I talk about myself, and I'm not asking for you to reflect on yourself, but I also am talking about 99% of my clients. If they survived a relationship with a narcissist and divorced them or got divorced, they're completely wiped out and they're broken and they need our services to heal. But they will make the same choice again. So the question is, why does someone who's been in therapy, say someone who's been in therapy or coaching, who has learned a great deal of information, that has grown, has learned how to set boundaries, has learned about self-esteem, why is the next person that they fall in love with, their next husband, their next wife, next partner, a narcissist? That is beyond conscious awareness. That is this connection that, hey, I'm a dancer and there's only one type of person I like to dance with that feels right. And your broken picker is always going to choose the wrong person. So, and I say that to help people understand that how impactful trauma is on our relationship choices. If we were hurt really badly as a child and did not learn about self-love, did not learn about healthy relationships, we are going to repeat these same mistakes over and over again until we find out what happened to us and how skewed or gaslit we became in that process, so that we recognize love in the eyes of a broken, harmful person.
What do you think is one skill within, self-love, when you think of this huge thing, love yourself and everything? What is, or not even just skill, what is one thing that you feel like most people don't do for themselves?
This sounds overly simplistic, is self-love. Now, self-love can be anything that makes you feel good, makes you feel. It's like how would you treat yourself the same way as you would treat your best friend. I think Adam Roa did something on YouTube that really impacted me on that. And so, if you can take care of yourself like you would do your child, sleep late, take a day off of work, buy clothes that you always wanted, it's the belief that you deserve it. It's the motivation that you want to give it to yourself. And it's the absence of the negative self-talk, the gaslighting. So to answer your question, the one thing that exemplifies self-love the most is recognizing in any given moment what you want and neutralizing any thought that talks you out of it. And that could be a good cup of coffee or a wonderful person that you just met that you want to spend, the afternoon with.